Hello, this is Robert Faust, and I'm really kind of motivated to make a quick video here about my feelings about what happened in Maui, Lahaina, Maui. Uh, I spent many years in Hawaii in the 90s, so I lived there about 18 years, and I established a farm for coffee along with St. Croix hair sheep. Um, Cherimoya bananas, citrus, but that was after working as a consultant for Mac Farms of Hawaii, working on decline and converting to organics with macadamia nuts. But anyway, I studied Hawaii agroecology and working with natives or local, as we call them, learning the ancient canoe crops, the ones that were actually brought in their canoes to establish life, to be able to survive on the island of Hawaii, which had basically no food plants that were of much value at all. So the Polynesians brought taro, um, pineapples. No, I'm just kidding. They didn't bring pineapples, but they brought papaya. And they brought a few things like chickens and even little dogs and pigs, little pigs, Polynesian pigs. And then, of course, they had breadfruit, a range of other things that were used for fiber. But anyway, it was a completely self sufficient culture, well planned, colonized essentially an untouched island, volcanic, and various stages of volcanic effect, everything from active volcanoes on the Big Island to, a very old, more weathered island like Kauai, which is the north side. But anyway, I could go on and on about Hawaii, but the point of the matter is they had a vibrant, self-sufficient culture that could. It's amazing. And the history, there's a lot known because Captain Cook, the first English or European person to, well, I mean, he stopped there, but he also had a naturalist. He had some folks that were taking notes, drawing pictures, and so we know a lot more how it was because of that than we do other so-called Stone Age cultures. But there's still remnants of that culture. And I lived in South Kona, and I did manage to make quite a few friends. And I learned about Hawaiian agroecology and just a lot about the culture and the agricultural methods that were used. And of course, I've written papers on that. And there's one you can check out that's Hawaiian agriculture as a model of sustainability. So they didn't need to import anything. They couldn't. They were 2,400 miles from the nearest continent. They had to feed their people, and they did more than feed. They had all kinds of cultural traditions and arts and crafts and dance and sports. An amazing level of various sports, and then of course canoeing, fishing. It was just about a ideal life in some ways. Of course, they still had warfare. There was still conflict from time to time. You can see right behind me there that poster there on my door behind me, and that's depicts a Hawaiian village back in pre-contact days. And everything is designed up and down the hill, Mackay and Malka, and that was to, you can see that a little closer, activities on the coast and then activities up the side of the mountain at different elevations for different things. As they utilized everything from the ocean to the mountain. And it's just a beautiful system. And the philosophy that guided it. They brought their main food plant, which is widely found in Polynesia today, like when I was in Tonga and Samoa last winter. Um, they still, are maintaining a fair amount of self-sufficiency, at least people out in the country, the locals. And they had patches of taro, and because that's the main crop, the main staple or starch containing food. So fish and poi, but poi is a roasted pounded taro, which in the Spanish world is the yucca. So it's cooked and then beaten with a taro, with a stone tool that would crush the cooked taro root, making a paste. And then that was put in a pot or a basket and fermented. It's really an acidophilus fermentation of the starch, of the taro. I like it. It's acquired taste, but of course, this taro is used in all kinds of ways, in South America, Central America, Caribbean, Polynesia. You can cook it up and make a stew like potatoes. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. And that was one of their main ones. But where that couldn't be grown because you need water, it's planted in water, which is how, what's unique about it. It can grow dry land too, but upland in other areas, they grew sweet potatoes because that's just a different need in terms of you can grow that more on a hillside. You can make raised beds and more of a high humus soil, whereas taro can be grown in, really in water, standing water, ideally, so clay soil. But anyway, I'm getting away from it. But the point of the matter is, this fire that burned up Lahaina, this has been a long time coming. I mean, the history is, of course, the sugar planters who were missionaries initially came in as saying there's missionaries going to convert everybody to Christianity. Instead, they'd get the chiefs drunk and befriend them and get them to sign a paper and sign it off the land to them, you know. Then they started sugar companies, and they were all New England people, merchants, missionaries, and so it was really associated a lot with Boston. And so a lot of sugar companies, Alexander and Baldwin, and there's a whole bunch of people starting huge plantations of sugarcane because anywhere you can grow sugarcane, countries needed their sugar islands and they'd fight for them. And so they could get their sugar for their coffee or sugar in their coffee and their rum and profits from slaves trade. So they were always struggling. That was a real valuable thing. So they basically completely plowed over, kind of genocided the native population. And the loss of the culture and a system that had persisted for thousands of years. People that could navigate across huge oceans, amazingly, who had perfected fishing, agroecology at its utmost. I mean, they produced all their own medicines, their fibers, their food, and they were some of the healthiest, strongest people ever. Matter of fact, the medical officer, uh, a naturalist, on the Captain Cook first contact, which was in actually just below where my farm was in Kealakekua Bay. So what happened there was they were initially friendly because they associated this huge ship with its white sails and this captain with fancy outfit on as the return of Lono. And now that goes into the whole story of Lono and how the Hawaiians learned a lot of techniques, technology, and received the sweet potato plant. See, this is a real mystery because the sweet potato comes from Central and South America only, and that's where it originated. So how did the Hawaiians get it? It was a staple crop in Kona, particularly, and in Maui, just and in more hilly areas where it's more suitable. But yeah, so there had to be, according to them, Lono brought it, and then he departed into the heavens at Kealakekua Pali. So he was a figure something like Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, somebody that comes in and provides information and science and math, and you see monumental building. And of course, I lived above the Pua Honua Ohona now, which was, we don't know exactly what it really was, but the stone structure is still there. But it was a platform, a stone platform that had structures on it and stone. And a lot of this was destroyed and used to build local churches even. But so that's a national monument now. Pua Honua is a sacred site where a lot of things happen. There's an energy field there, uh, and they knew it. And this is where they built these temples, and they had the kahunas and various specialties. It's just an amazing culture. And then they had sports, but the original contactees, Captain Cook's party, is they're some of the healthiest and best looking people they'd ever seen, and they were amazed at the athleticism and the hardiness of these people, and were active in these sports, everything from wrestling, like boxing type martial arts, to like skiing down hills with these sleds on dry land that were, you know, so they did canoe racing and all kinds of things. And then the hula, tremendous like tradition in dance. They could keep the family history, the genealogy, by chance, by memory, and then pass it down along with all their other knowledge, navigation, medicines, how to survive with no imports, a bigger population than they had today. So how did they do it? Yeah, okay. So here the sugar companies come along and they start growing sugar cane, and then they couldn't get enough labor, so then they bring in like Japanese, Filipinos, anybody they could get because they couldn't do the slavery thing. So they did the next best thing. They bring people in, low wages, they had to live in shacks, whatnot, and various groups. They started with Japanese, and the Japanese basically, after a while, figured things out and started businesses and doing better things than cutting sugarcane. And then you had other groups, Filipinos and so forth. But it got to the point where they started doing it mechanically with bulldozers. And then there's problems with EPA because the soil is leaching into the ocean because they harvest with bulldozers. They just bulldoze the whole field, a great big pile of cane and dirt. With, I mean, the biggest bulldozers around, And then they'd pick them up with like a grapple, dirt and everything, and they'd take it to the mill, and then they wash it, and then the dirt and mud would go down the river out to the ocean. Yeah. So a lot of the soil and fertility that was there that fed people for maybe tens of thousands of years, you know, we're not sure, but at least the present Hawaiian population came from Polynesia. So a couple thousand, 1,500, is what they say. But anyway, so when you put in sugarcane, and then it got to the point where sugarcane is like subsidized, it shouldn't be, so there's a lot of sugar cane around the world. So it not only got unprofitable in Hawaii because they were getting lower yield because they washed their soil away, and they were using high levels of Roundup and stuff to desiccate, to kill it early, and then or burning, burn the whole field. So that goes on for, I don't know, maybe 100 years. And so they haven't been doing cane in Hawaii since, I think it was 2007 or two, something I forget. But anyway, they're not doing sugar cane anymore because they're burning the fields all the time, and so that fell away. So then they, of course, try to sell condos and build golf courses. But in other areas, they would plant guinea grass, which is a really tall, like sharp grass. It'll cut you even. It's like an African grass. It can be like 10 feet tall. And there's all kinds of gnarly, weedy stuff there, like kiave, which is Clearacedia, and mesquite, what you call California mesquite. All kinds of brushy, like weedy, like vines that'll cover trees, and then in the dry season it's just tinder. And you got 7, 8 foot tall grass that's dry. If you have a drought, it's just like paper. One spark and it's gone. So the conquest of takeover, and overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii led to Lahaina burning last week. So the sugarcane farming was over. So they just let the land go back to guinea grass, maybe graze some cattle, and that's it. So now the economy is resorts, tourism. So that's the biggie. That, and maybe you can develop land and sell condos to really wealthy people, for sure. And some more golf courses. I spent a lot of time in Hawaii fighting the establishment of golf courses for sound ecological reasons. Anyway, I wasn't that successful, but neither were the people that built the golf courses. So I think it's okay. But so that's what ended up happening is a transition, of extractive thinking instead of sustainability. Population, everybody having a good time, life. There's no money, there's no banks, there's no capitalism. It worked fine. Worked fine. Was it sustainable? Yeah. Are we? No. How many years does it take to call yourself sustainable? Well, they have about 1,500, and we don't know a whole bunch of years before that in the Polynesian chains, Tonga, Samoa, etc. and then on to New Zealand, where they were very successful and managed to fight off the British pretty well and maintain control of a lot of their lands to this day. A lot of lands, I mean. So they really had to fight for it. But it was a sneaky takeover when sugar planters in the U.S. Uh, overthrew the Queen of Hawaii. It wasn't a pitched battle or anything. That's a whole story too. It was illegally taken by people that were essentially you know businessmen from Boston. You know, and some of them married Hawaiian royalty. And so then now you have these big estates that hold most of the land in Hawaii. The good land is held by estates. And if you want to farm or do something or have a resort, well, it's leasehold. You're leasing that land. Just like the whole area that I lived in, farmed in, and there was lots of farms, and it was all Bishop estate leaseholds. The land itself is worth probably over $1 million an acre in some of these areas, but you can't buy it because it's owned by this estate, which is a royalty princess who married a guy named Bishop, who was a lawyer from Boston. And so, it's a huge operation with thousands of acres of land. And so, yeah, but so the main focus is not agriculture, it's tourism. And so they rely on that and import 90% of the food and energy. So as opposed to the original Hawaiians that imported nothing except for the stuff they started with. The bananas, the taro, the ginger, whatnot, chickens, things they brought in, sweet potatoes, thanks to Lono. And they were doing fine. Yeah, they have some bloody battles, sure, thins the herd, you might say. But they were getting it together. And then this, extractive frenzy, which is what Westerners are into, just move on, move on. What can we get out of here? Wow, sugar and make money. And they do that for a while, and then got into pineapple. Man, it was Dole, Sanford Dole. He was actually the same guy, kind of guy from Boston, And then I think his cousin became governor. But then they were the ones that planted acres and acres of pineapple, which is not native to Hawaii at all. They never had pineapple. That's been like Brazil and northern, South American areas in South America. It's not from, no, there's never any pineapples in Hawaii. But Dole planted thousands of acres of them until it was a monoculture and they get infested with a root aphid and then Yellow's disease and a whole bunch of other things, including rats eating it, and then nematodes. See, so then they were using worse and worse pesticides, and they had killed the soil by then. Their farming methods, loss of humic substances, loss of organic matter, loss of the whole topsoil, and then resistance from insects, nematodes, and everything else. And it poisoned the wells, the nematicides and fungicides and all this other stuff, and they were using a lot. And it poisoned the wells, and they have a high cancer rate, including breast cancer and cervical cancer and everything else from these nematicides leaching into the wells. So then okay, well, all right, we'll sell the land for condos and move on. So now they take the pineapple business to Thailand and, even Mexico and other locations, anywhere they can pull that off again. Uh, so yeah, in a monoculture, it's not a sustainable crop for sure. The way they do it. So Hawaii was the model for sustainability and a system that they developed for that ecosystem. There was a perfect meld of what resources and conditions were available and the plants and animals that matched that and allowed them to have a very successful situation. So then in comes the Western invaders, and here we go again. It's just exploitive. What can we take? What can we mine, dig up? What can we steal? Is there any gold? Well, there wasn't. So, oh well, we'll grow sugar cane and get slaves, And so they did that until that didn't work anymore. They extracted all the capital, the wealth in the soils that the Hawaiians had built up over 1,000 years, and then they go in with pineapple, thousands and thousands of acres. So you have two crops that you can't feed people on pineapple and sugarcane. Where's the taro? Where's the breadfruit? Where's the fish ponds? Where's the sweet potatoes? No. And that's a whole other story of what happened when they were exposed to a Western type diet. That's a tragic story in itself. But there's your the dichotomy. What's really sustainable, proven historically, and what's behind that, and their attitudes of how they saw each other in the community and their identity and nature was very different. And I have it listed in that paper of what the precepts were. So the Western world was, we got to make some money on this. This is it was all about accumulating like wealth in some way by taking something that's already there or creating, something that you can sell and utilize cheap labor or free labor. So yeah, it's extractive, industrial. It's not meant to let's go live and have a nice life and we'll eat good. No, it's about extracting wealth, taking it back to New England or California, which is because they would ship the raw sugar to California, where they had the mill uh, in near San Francisco to refine the sugar. But of course, that's where the money is made when you refine it to white sugar, package it, distribute it. So the Hawaii economy was only getting a fraction of what the value was, and it's ironic today because you have so many Hawaiians living in the Bay Area and in the Portland area because you can do better over here in the mainlands. I mean, I now live in Oregon, and things are definitely better, you know, economically, no question about it. You know, so there's a lot more opportunities. So Hawaiians came to the West Coast, and we have better Hawaiian restaurants in my town, in this area, than you find in Hawaii. It's because this is a farm area. We produce lots of food, 13 or 14 times more produced than is consumed. It's export. So yeah, so bigger portions, nicer, it's better. They don't produce any rice. That's the big part of Hawaiian diet now is rice, and kailua pork and kailua hula chicken, teriyaki beef, So these things aren't produced. Even cattle, they would produce the cattle. They'd raise them on the range, and then they would ship the 1,000 pound steers, I guess, or 800 pound, whatever. They'd ship them to the mainland by ship, and then they'd put them in feedlots where they fatten them up on corn and silage, which they don't have in Hawaii or didn't. And then they would be sold or slaughtered and marketed in the west coast of the U.S. And so if you wanted that kind of meat, then it was packaged and frozen and whatever, shipped back to Hawaii. So they didn't even have that together. Of course, people would go out and shoot wild cattle and locals and so forth. But bottom line, it was a dependent on exports, even imports, even then, because you can't live on pineapple you know. And so the people were still producing taro. There's still people subsistence farming, but not many. It's a different ball game because the population of Hawaiians in Hawaii was only like 20%, or so, like it is now. And so, but all this greed and just no thought for the environment or any even considering what was going to happen. And then they introduced all kinds of weeds, so that's why you have like a weedy situation. They could go plant like taro and stuff or yams up in the mountain and just come back 6 months later because they didn't have weeds to deal with. You could plant and then just come back and you'd have a crop. But now, oh my God, it's a weed patch. Well, these grasses, elephant grass they call it, it's like 12 feet tall, and all kinds of gnarly weeds that cattle and sheep won't eat. So it turns in. Then you have wild guava like taking over. It's like, I even have myconia, like a plant that got introduced from Brazil. It's just terrible. So it just turned like an agricultural paradise. Like, you don't have any weeds. Oh my God, you just plant. That's incredible. So now it's a weed patch. So it grew up because there ain't no sugar cane. We're not doing anything with land. A few cattle maybe, but that's not even a winner because you had to ship them to the mainland. So it just goes wild, and then they have funky infrastructure there with the telephone wire or the electrical wires. I mean, they'd be, yeah. And so a hurricane comes along, and one out of, hundreds of years, and you got old rotten telephone poles, and you got stretched wire, probably poor maintenance. It's just, and you get sparking. I saw it myself, you know. I saw a lot of things in Hawaii. That's a whole nother story. But this is what happened. It ignited just the worst situation. A high wind, blowing the wires. They're falling down. They're sparking, and you get all these fires. It started up higher, Kula, in a place called Kula, up what they call upcountry Maui, the higher mountain, and then it just followed the power line, and the wind just blew it, consumed like just millions of tons of this grass and weeds and brush. If you get lost in that stuff. It's so thick and tall. It's amazing. Um, and then you've got these plants and trees that, well, like mesquite for one, and just brushy stuff. So that's what happened. And they didn't have it together. Um, but there may be not much they could have done. If if they'd now here we have a lot of forest fires in Oregon and California, Washington. It's terrible. And I mean, they're using helicopters, dropping water. They got bulldozers. They got hundreds of men. But in Hawaii, they don't. So, they couldn't do much, apparently. They didn't cut any fire breaks. It just happened too fast. And so that's an ecological situation that's happened there, you know. And where do they go from here? That's the question. And it's a sad thought. But could it all be restored? Oh, yeah, maybe, uh, but probably not. Who's going to pay for it? And there's all kinds of issues involved, you know. And so, what if tourism goes bad? What if the U.S. economy goes bad? And people aren't traveling and staying at all those hotels. They're so incredibly expensive. So then everything crashes, you know. So I guess they all come here. I don't know, but that's the tragic story of Hawaii. Went from a true paradise and sustainable system. Had all kinds of. It was an advanced society. You know, it's just I could go on for hours about it. The history, the agricultural traditions, what they were doing, and how much sense it all made. That to like a mindless thing, you know, with tourism and you know, souvenir shops, the usual thing, you know. And the people have to commute for an hour or two from cheaper places to work in these hotels. So it's really, like I'm saying, it's a pretty sad story. And yeah, I imagine if you had enough money and you were the king of Hawaii again, you might be able to start restoring it. They still remember a lot of the traditions, and there's people that are doing a lot of the things that have kept it alive. The different traditions, the fishing, growing the taro, and other things. So yeah, kahunas. I've met plenty of them, you know, and there's plenty of people that were Kingdom of Hawaii people, you know, the succession movement. You know, like we want our country back, and how that could ever happen, I don't know. But it's not. It's a system that could collapse completely. And it's really one of the biggest industries is the military. You got every kind of military there, and they use it for bombing targets. So it was a great experience living there and seeing the potential and trying to come up with programs for farmers and you know to make the industry work. But they weren't really didn't want that to happen. To them, agriculture was kind of an enemy to the powers to be because the agriculture always competes with tourism wherever you have those two come together. And so the tourist industry needs a lot of workers, you know. So they don't want them working on farms. They don't want to. No, 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 no. We're not. We don't want agriculture. Plus, we control the land, and you can't have any. So they create a situation where they had no choice. And then if you try to do something, establish no, I've had. They say, oh, we don't need agriculture. I've talked to big shots like the mayor of a big island at one point. And no, you know, jobs. We got plenty of jobs. What do you mean? We don't need agriculture. You know, we got these hotels. You know, resorts. We need people to serve drinks and wash dishes and clean rooms and you know. Then hope tourists keep coming. If they don't, well, then what? That's the thing. So, unfortunately, uh, Hawaii is in for more problems. We'll probably see more of these fires, just like we are here. Um, it's when I was living in Hawaii, we went through some droughts. It's pretty bad, you know. We have periodic droughts, and now it's like big time droughts, and so that's what happens when you have a climate that's wet season, dry season climate. You build up a lot of biomass, and then you get the dry season. And if it's drier and hotter, then you got a lot of stuff to burn because in the wet season it can grow pretty fast. So you have a bad situation. You can turn into a desert island when you're done. The burning and drying and you know then eventually, just like on these like Molokai, where they sugared it and logged it to death, which is true of most of the island, it starts to turn into a desert because you don't have any evapotranspiration. You don't have trees up on the mountain top that that transpire and cool the air enough to condense clouds. Yeah, and ice nucleating bacteria on the leaf. So it just turns into a desert. Now they did do some reforestation, put trees up there, and yeah, it starts raining again. You get cloud formation. See, but they're not thinking about that. No. But that's what happens. So that's for the story of the desert island, how it gets to be a desert island in a couple hundred years. You know, this after people living there for maybe 1500, maybe longer, uh, starting, with almost a perfect scenario of clean air, clean water, no weeds, wow, no snakes, not many insects, beautiful birds, lots of them, different things, lots of fish, really good fishing, really good. And that was it. There wasn't any mammals. The only mammal was a bat, a Hawaiian hoary bat, a bat that got blown in there on a hurricane or something that took off. And so that was it for mammals, was the bat, Hawaiian hoary bat. And there was a few big birds, but there's a lot of birds that fed on flowers. Just dozens of species that are extinct now, of course, because the introduced cattle, trampled their nests and ate their trees and everything else. So, we're always looking for what's sustainable, how can we live, and what should we do? Hey, no, there's some folks that were doing that. Look behind my shoulder, this shoulder, no, the other shoulder. Yeah, that's how they live on that map there. Um, so there you go. We're looking for something that existed that we destroyed, and it's gonna go down in flames and or starvation. So, is there anything we can do about it? Let me know, because I know what needs to be done. But that's just a dream, but probably doable. Given given the resources, and if you were a king of Hawaii and a pretty smart, uh, wise person, it'd be tricky. But give it a couple hundred years. But otherwise, we're looking at, well, it's just like this other island. It's off of Maui, on the other side of Maui. You got Ko'olawe, which is an island, and yeah, it's a sad story because they used it for a bombing range in World War II. It used to be a sacred island, and they had an observatory, and yeah, they just bombed the hell out of it, to practice bombing. Oh, let's pick an island and bomb it. And so you can't go there because it's dangerous, these unexploded bombs and stuff. So it's that's something else, you know. So and then there's even valleys on Oahu that were bombed and practice like stuff laying all over, you know, that you don't want to go there. And beautiful valleys that were probably taro. A lot of people live there, and now it's dangerous because you can step on an unexploded bomb. Oh, it's well, that's my story of what happened in Lahaina. Bottom line, and that town has a long history. It used to be the capital, you're the king and all Lahaina. And more than that, you know, it was the whalers came in there in the wintertime in Alaska. That's kind of a bad thing. So there's a lot of yeah, they came in and yeah, it wasn't just the land and growing sugarcane and stuff like that. It was killing the whales. Okay, yeah, making money from killing whales and of course mass big time fishing, which still goes on, with like long line and these big trawlers that stay out at sea for a year, and you know, Japanese, and they're just completely harvesting the ocean, destroying the ocean, you know. And you got microplastics and everything, and so they just you know, go around and just what can we grab that can make bucks, make some money. You know, even the word bucks, that was one deer skin. That's where you get the word buck, 1 buck, because that one deer skin. So anything that you can get, you know, you can turn it into money, or it is money. You give one deer skin, okay, a hamburger or whatever. So that's the history of Hawaii. It's a history not just of Hawaii, but the same stuff happened to the indigenous people of North America. Uh, as the mad tide of Anglo-Saxons, etc., pushed west and extracted what wealth they could and keep moving on. And so I'm here near the Pacific Ocean in this valley here, and this farmland was when the European settlers came here, some of the best in the world. The soil, the productivity was amazing, and it is when you know how to manage it. Even now, I can take, and I have turned it right around, but a lot of it's just turning white, and they're having problems, and diseases, and but by and large, it's still like one of the most productive farming areas in the world, only because global warming caused the glaciers to melt and the big dams, ice dams, and the lakes up north in Canada and Montana break and flood down the river systems and into the Willamette Valley and depositing uh, soil over a period of you know maybe 8 or 10 floods to where we have a rock-free, beautiful soil that's 20, 15, 20 feet deep. So it is by a lucky. It wasn't lucky for everybody. The places where the soil got washed from aren't doing too good. You know, it's like what they call the scab lands of Idaho and eastern Washington. It's that soil gone from there. It's down here. Although the best soil for grapes is the Jory soils. It's a red soil from volcanic, decayed millions of years old volcanic ash, and that's what I'm sitting on right now. That particular soil. It's in the hills and the mountains that didn't get the silt coming down the river systems from the glacial. Plus, plenty of glacial rock dust in that too. So I mean, you had something good, and yeah, it was so good. There's people lived here and had a civilization like the Hawaiians did, and figured it all out and had a niche and knew what they do. They didn't plant or harvest. They didn't plant. They managed the ecosystem. They weren't farming, but they managed this ecosystem for 10,000 years. And long before that, too, there was people here, and they were doing quite well again until the European colonists came in, and you have a situation where it's Bibles and bullets all over again. And, well, I should have said disease, Bible, and bullets, or disease, bullets, and Bibles. I don't know. But that's what ends up happening, and here, and so the soils in here are being destroyed and depleted, and it's just a matter of time. It's only been a state since like 1850 or something. So people have only been farming here, since 1860, 70 when they started coming in, and now it's hard to make it in farming. All the small farms that used to be here with lots of families and people, now are merged into big corporate farms, big giant multi-thousand acre farms where used to be 10 or 15 family farms. And, it's the same industrial farming mentality that you saw with the sugarcane in Hawaii. Here we go again. So, what can we do about it? I've been trying. Information isn't enough. I mean, there's just so many factors. It's so complicated, and the money men really decide. So you have let's face it, a handful of people call the shots, and set the prices, and you're always playing catch up. The prices never. If it starts out good, but then it deteriorates below your cost of production. So it's a system. What can we do about it? I'm not suggesting that because I'm not that smart. So it's beyond me what to do about it. But I know what it would take. But how do you get there? That's the question. And that's why I study ancient agriculture and agroecologies all over the world. So maybe someday that'll be important information. How did they survive for tens of thousands of years? And the first farmers too, like in Middle East, China, other areas. It worked. So I study stuff that worked, and why, and apply those principles to what we're doing now, or try to. So that's it. So I'm signing off from Northwest Oregon. My little rap on Lahaina in Maui, the tragedy of Hawaii. I'll call it from sustainability to tragedy. The islands of Hawaii. Aloha.